Welcome to True Horror Vault. There are lakes in this world that people avoid even in broad daylight. Beneath their calm, crystal clear waters hide mysteries that no one has ever been able to explain. In the vast lands of America, there are lakes that locals don't just call dangerous, they say someone is down in that water. Over the years, countless people have gone missing there. Some drowned in places where the water was only waist deep. Others claimed that someone was calling out their names from beneath the water. Search teams found abandoned boats, wet shoes, but the people were never seen again. Today's story comes from the shores of Georgia's infamous Lake Lanier. Whether you believe what you hear today is entirely up to you. But the person who shared this experience still claims, if I had stayed on top of that water for even one more minute that night, I wouldn't be alive today to tell this story. Story 1. What was calling me beneath the dark waters of Lake Lanier? My name is Alex Carter. I grew up in Beaufort, Georgia. Since childhood, Lake Lanier was a very familiar place to me. In the summer, everyone comes here to fish, ride boats, and camp. But my grandfather always said one thing: never stare at the waters of Lanier after the sun goes down. And if someone calls out your name, do not look back. I used to think these were nothing more than superstitions. October 2022, late autumn. My friends Mark, Ethan, and I decided to take a boat out onto the lake at night for some fishing. Many locals tried to discourage us. An old man standing at a gas station said, "After midnight, things other than fish are wide awake in that lake." We just laughed it off. It was around 10 p.m. There was no moon. The entire lake was shrouded in dense jet black darkness. Only the light from our small motorboat reached a few feet ahead of us. The silence around us was so heavy. It felt as if we were the only people left on Earth. Mark said, "It feels strangely quiet tonight." I replied, "This peace is the exact reason we came here." We slowly navigated toward the middle of the lake. The GPS indicated that the water beneath us was nearly 90 feet deep. I knew that when this lake was created, an entire town was submerged under the water. Old roads, houses, trees, churches, everything now sits at the bottom. But even then, I didn't think much about it. 11:47 p.m. We were fishing when suddenly, the boat jolted. It felt like something massive had bumped into it from below. Ethan asked, "Is it that big of a fish?" Mark shook his head and said, "No. That's something else." We flashed our flashlights at the water. Nothing was there, just pitch black water. Then, thump. This time the boat shook even harder. A strange sense of unease began to settle in my chest. Right at that moment, I heard someone say in a low voice, "Alex." I gasped and looked around. "Did one of you just call me?" Both of them looked confused. "No, we didn't." I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the wind. But a few seconds later, it came through even clearer. "Alex, look down." My entire body went cold. That voice, I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. It felt like it was coming from right beneath the water. I slowly pointed the flashlight down. At first I saw nothing. Then, as the beam moved slightly to the right, my hands began to tremble. Deep under the water, a human-like shape was standing. It wasn't floating. It was as if it was standing firmly on the ground, 90 feet below. Its head slowly turned up toward me. Two pale white eyes. It raised its hand and motioned for me to come closer. I dropped the flashlight. Mark yelled, "What happened?" Before I could say anything, the entire boat tilted to the right. Ethan almost fell into the water. The motor shut off on its own. All the lights died out. Nothing but darkness all around. Then, multiple voices joined in at once. They were all saying the exact same thing. "Come down. Stay with us. Don't go back." I couldn't tell if the sounds were carried by the wind or if they were echoing inside my head. Mark said in a trembling voice, "Start the engine." I kept trying to start it, but nothing worked. Right then, a wet hand emerged from one side of the boat. I saw it clearly. Pale, abnormally long fingers, rotting skin, gripping the edge of the boat. I froze. Ethan looked back and screamed, "That's not human." Suddenly, an ice-cold gust of wind swept across the entire lake. At that exact second, the engine suddenly roared back to life. I didn't hesitate for a single moment. I pushed the throttle to full speed and dashed. toward the dock. But there was a problem. The GPS showed we were moving, but ahead of us was the same thick fog, the same dead trees, and the same broken buoy. It felt like we were driving in circles, stuck in the exact same spot. Suddenly, in the distance, an old church bell rang. I knew there was no church in the middle of this lake. There used to be, but now it was deep under the water. Mark whispered, "They want to drag us down." Right at that moment, despite having no network signal, my phone screen lit up. On the screen, a single line was written, "Don't look back." I had no idea how that message appeared, but I didn't look back, not even once. After about 5 minutes, the fog suddenly cleared, and the lights of the dock came into view. We scrambled back onto dry land, desperate to survive. The next morning, we returned to that same spot in broad daylight. Everything seemed completely normal. However, on the wooden side of the boat, there were 5 long scratches, deeply carved as if by human fingernails. And the most terrifying part, in the final photo taken on our camera that night, all 3 of us were sitting on the boat. But under the water, directly beneath us, at least 10 to 12 human figures were looking up at us, with their heads raised. After staring at the photo for a few seconds, Mark slammed the laptop shut. He never went back to Lake Lanier after that. Neither did I. Even today, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night because I can clearly hear, "Alex, we are still down here." Story 2. The Woman in White at Lake Ronkonkoma. You are listening to True Horror Vault. Some lakes drown people, some lakes swallow people whole. And then there are lakes that first make you believe everything is fine, and then show you something so horrifying that you can never return to a normal life again. Today's story takes place on the shores of one of New York's most notoriously cursed lakes, Lake Ronkonkoma. Local legend says that this lake claims at least one male life every single year. The man in this story is still alive today, but he swears on his life. The girl I saw standing on top of the water that night was no living human. My name is David Miller. I grew up on Long Island, New York. Since childhood, I had heard stories about Lake Ronkonkoma. People said that late at night, a woman dressed in white could be seen near the lake. She wouldn't harm anyone. She would just stand there and stare. But if anyone went near her, they never returned. I never believed in those stories. November 2023. My friends Ryan, Chris, and I went out for some night photography. Our goal was to capture the mist hovering over the lake beneath the starry night sky. 12:19 a.m. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Fog was gradually spreading over the water. The entire lake looked like a sheet of black glass. There wasn't a single breath of wind. Ryan was setting up his camera. Chris said, "It feels unnaturally quiet here." I smiled and replied, "What better atmosphere could we ask for to get great photos?" Right at that moment, a small ripple rose in the middle of the lake. Then another one. Yet, there was no wind. As I looked through my zoom lens, I saw it. A human silhouette inside the fog. A white dress. Long hair. She was standing on top of the water. She wasn't sinking, she wasn't walking. She was just standing completely still. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I snapped a photo with my camera. When I looked at the picture, my heart sank into my chest. She was there in the camera too. Ryan took the camera from my hand and asked, "Is that a boat?" I shook my head and said, "No, if it were a boat, there would be a reflection beneath it." All 3 of us kept staring. Suddenly, she slowly lifted her head. Even though there was a significant distance between us, I felt it. She was staring directly into my eyes. Then, she smiled. No, that wasn't a human smile. Her lips moved, but the corners of her mouth stretched so far wide, as if her face had grown unnaturally large. Chris whispered, "Let's go. Let's get out of here." Right then, the water around the lake began to churn all at once. It felt as though countless things were moving beneath the surface. Ryan suddenly said, "She called my name." Surprised, I asked, "What?" He said in a shaking voice. I heard it clearly. "Ryan, come here." Neither of us had heard anything, but Ryan slowly began walking toward the lake. His eyes were completely blank. I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. He was walking like a sleepwalker, offering no resistance at all. Right at that moment, a piercing, loud wail of a woman echoed from across the lake. My whole body shuddered. Chris screamed, "David, hold on to him!" Ryan started thrashing wildly, shouting, "She's all alone, we have to help her." But as we looked toward the lake, it was no longer just one person. 4 figures dressed in white were standing in the middle of the water, all extending their hands toward us at once. My head began to spin. The surrounding sounds seemed to fade into the distance. Suddenly, it felt like my mother was calling me. "David, come here." The voice was so real. For a moment, I felt like walking forward too. Right then, Chris shoved me hard. I snapped back to reality. He screamed, "Cover your ears, don't listen to them." The two of us dragged Ryan toward the car. When we were almost at the parking lot, I made the mistake of looking back one last time. To this day, I cannot forget that sight. On the shore of the lake, right where we had been standing just seconds ago, there were now at least 15 to 20 white-clad figures, all completely silent, all staring directly at us. None of them had visible eyes, just black, empty sockets. And slowly, they all tilted their heads sideways in unison, as if disappointed that we had managed to escape. We jumped into the car and locked the doors. I tried to start the engine, but the car wouldn't start. Right at that moment, on the rear windshield, a wet handprint appeared. Then another one. Then several more. None of us had the courage to look back. After almost a minute, the engine suddenly roared to life. I sped away at full speed. The next morning, I reviewed the camera photos on my computer. Most of the pictures were normal. But the very last photo, the one taken right before we got into the car, there was no one standing by the lake. Instead, all those white figures were standing right behind us, so close that their cold breath felt as if it were touching our necks. And the most terrifying detail, in one corner of the photo, Ryan was standing, with a pale white hand resting on his shoulder. None of us had seen that hand on that night. Ryan never went back to Lake Ronkonkoma after that, but even today, he sometimes talks in his sleep, saying the same thing. She's still waiting, standing on top of the water. Story 3. The Black Fog of Lake Michigan. You are listening to True Horror Vault. In some American lakes, people go missing. In some lakes, mysterious shadows are seen. And in some lakes, rescue teams say only one thing. There is something beneath the water, but we don't know what it is. Today's story took place in one of North America's most treacherous bodies of water, Lake Michigan. This lake is so vast that it is often mistaken for an ocean. Over the years, hundreds of ships, small and large boats, and countless people have vanished here. But what I saw, I have never been able to explain to this day. My name is Nathan Brooks. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am a commercial boat operator by profession. For nearly 15 years, I have navigated cargo ships across Lake Michigan. I knew every current, every breeze, and every weather shift of this lake. At least, that's what I thought. This happened in the last week of October 2021. My colleague Jason and I had an urgent delivery of equipment to make to Ludington, Michigan, at night. The weather forecast promised clear skies. There was no chance of a storm. We set sail around 9 p.m. The first 2 hours were completely normal. Countless stars filled the sky. The lake water was unnaturally calm. The GPS was working perfectly, and the radar showed smooth sailing. But after 11 p.m., a sudden fog began to roll in. It happened so fast, as if someone had laid a thick white blanket over the entire lake in an instant. Visibility dropped to barely 30 feet. Jason remarked, "Such dense fog wasn't in the forecast." I just nodded, feeling a growing sense of unease. 5 minutes later, a strange blip appeared on the radar screen, directly ahead of us, stationary. I assumed it was another boat. But surprisingly, the AIS, Automatic Identification System, showed no vessel nearby. We slowly closed the distance. Right then, a deep, metallic horn sounded from the fog. Horn! The sound felt so ancient, as if a steamship from 100 years ago was sounding its horn. I looked around. Nothing. Just thick fog. Then, out of the fog, a massive dark silhouette slowly emerged. An old steel ship. Rusted. Windows smashed. Its smokestack collapsed. But the most horrifying part was the ship moved in absolute silence. No engine sound, no wake in the water. It felt like, rather than floating on water, it was gliding through the fog. Jason whispered, "How is that here?" I attempted to make radio contact. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself." No response. I tried again. Silence. Suddenly, a crackling, broken voice came through the radio. "Dad, help us." Then static. I froze. The voice returned again. "Don't let it come aboard." After that, everything went dead silent. When we were about 100 yards away, people suddenly appeared on the deck of that ghost ship. First one person, then two, then dozens, all standing completely motionless. They wore antique life jackets. Their faces were unnaturally pale. None of them had eyes, just dark, hollow sockets. They were all staring at us at the exact same time. Jason suddenly began to tremble. He said, "One of them looks like my father." I stared at him in shock. Jason's father had passed away many years ago. I warned him, "Don't look over there." But he didn't listen. As if hypnotized, he walked toward the edge of our deck. His eyes were devoid of any emotion. He simply mumbled, "They are going to take me home." I grabbed him and tried to pull him back. Right at that second, all the people on the deck of the old ship raised their hands simultaneously. They were speaking, but I couldn't make out the words. Then, one word came through crystal clear. "Come." Instantly, our ship's engine shut down. All lights went out. The GPS went pitch black. The radar died. We were stranded in complete darkness in the middle of the lake. Right then, a violent impact struck from beneath our ship. Thud. Our ship violently shuddered. Another impact. Then, slowly, the ship felt as if it were being dragged downward. I knew that was impossible. A steel ship couldn't just sink straight down like that. And yet, we were sinking. I rushed down to the lower deck, thinking water was rushing in somewhere. But what I saw down there, to this day, I haven't been able to fully tell anyone. There was no water in the bilge compartment. Instead, there were wet footprints. Dozens of them. As if many people were walking around barefoot. Yet there was no one down there except me. I switched on my flashlight. The footprints were forming right in front of my eyes. Someone invisible was walking around. Suddenly, I felt an ice-cold breath on the back of my neck. I whipped around. No one was there, but in the beam of the flashlight, a wet handprint slowly appeared on the wall. Beneath it, as if drawn with a finger, someone wrote, "Stay." My entire body went completely numb. Right at that moment, Jason's scream echoed from the upper deck. I sprinted back upstairs and saw he had climbed over the railing. Just one more step and he would fall into the dark lake. He was staring down into the black water, smiling. Using every ounce of strength I had left, I tackled him back onto the deck. At that exact second, a powerful gust of wind swept through. The fog tore apart instantly. The old ship vanished into thin air, as if it had never existed. At the very same time, our engine started up on its own. All equipment returned to normal. We reached the port by dawn. The Coast Guard listened to our report in complete silence. An elderly officer asked just one question. "Did you see an old steel ship inside the fog?" I nodded. He let out a long sigh and said, "You two are lucky." He didn't say another word. 2 weeks later, I was looking through historical records of naval accidents. My eyes locked onto a black and white photograph. A picture of a cargo steamer that had vanished in Lake Michigan back in 1912. My blood ran cold, because that was the exact same ship. The same broken smokestack. The same rusted deck. The same shape. And among the crew standing on the deck in the photograph, one man looked exactly like Jason's deceased father. I still don't go out onto Lake Michigan at night. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, my marine radio, which stays turned off inside my closet, crackles to life all by itself. And then, just 4 words float out. Don't let it aboard. Story 4. The Deep Blue Darkness of Lake Tahoe. You are listening to True Horror Vault. In some American lakes, people disappear without a trace. In some lakes, mysterious shadows are seen. But there is one lake where for years, campers, hunters, and park rangers have all reported the exact same thing. If you hear a child crying by the water at night, never walk toward that sound. Today's story took place on the northwestern shore of California's Lake Tahoe. During the day, this lake looks like paradise on earth. But late at night, many who have stared into its dark waters have seen things that changed their lives forever. My name is Ryan Foster. I live in Reno, Nevada. Ever since I was young, camping in the mountains, forests, and lakes has been my passion. In September 2024, I went camping alone for 3 days on the northern shore of Lake Tahoe. That turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. The first day was completely ordinary. I fished in the afternoon and built a campfire at night. The sky was covered with stars. The water was so clear that the moonlight pierced deep beneath the surface. But before the sun set, an elderly park ranger told me, "If you hear a child crying after 2 a.m., don't assume someone needs help." I laughed it off and asked, "Where would a child come from out here?" He didn't answer. He just slowly walked away. 1:58 a.m. I was lying in my tent when suddenly, I opened my eyes. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it again. A young child was crying, sounding completely helpless. The noise was coming from the direction of the lake. I tried to rationalize it, thinking it was probably just a bird call. Then it came again, this time much closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent. When I reached the shore, there was no one around, just fog and black water. The crying suddenly stopped. Just as I turned to head back, small ripples began forming on the surface of the water. It looked as if an invisible force was throwing pebbles into the lake, one after another. Yet no one was there. I flashed my beam across the water and saw a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Wearing an old white dress, her wet hair hung over her face. She was standing in waist-deep water, staring at me. I shouted, "Hey, are you okay?" No reply. She just slowly raised her right hand and motioned for me to come closer. As soon as I took 2 steps forward, a deep voice suddenly shouted from behind me, "Don't go near her." I whipped around, no one was there. I turned back toward the lake, the girl was gone. The entire lake was empty. I thought to myself, it was probably a hallucination caused by exhaustion. I went back to the tent and tried to sleep. Around 3 a.m., knock, knock, knock. Someone was slowly walking outside the tent, the sound of wet footsteps. The steps circled the tent once, then stopped. I mustered up the courage to unzip the tent and look outside. No one was there. However, surrounding the tent were small, wet footprints, all belonging to a child. The next morning, I tried to forget the incident. I spent the day hiking. In the afternoon, I struck up a conversation with an elderly local fisherman nearby. When I mentioned the little girl, his face paled. He asked softly, "You saw her?" I nodded. He said, 30 years ago, a family died here in a boating accident. The little girl's body was never found." Then he added in a hushed whisper, "But sometimes, she isn't alone." The second night, I resolved not to leave my tent no matter what happened. 2:17 a.m., the crying started again. But this time it wasn't just one. Then 2, then 3, then dozens of children crying at the same time. My heart pounded against my chest. Right then, someone softly whispered my name. "Ryan." The sound was right outside my tent wall. I held my breath. Again, "Ryan, we are cold." My hands and feet went numb. I didn't say a word. Suddenly, small handprints pressed against the fabric of the tent from the outside. Then another. Then, dozens of them. It felt as though a crowd of children was standing outside, pressing their hands against the canvas. I closed my eyes tightly and sat still. Suddenly, all the noise ceased. I gathered my courage and clicked on the flashlight. As the light illuminated the inside of the tent, I froze. At the very foot of my sleeping bag was a single, wet, small footprint. Inside, even though I hadn't opened the tent all night. As dawn broke, I packed up my gear to leave immediately. While walking toward my car, I felt like someone was walking behind me. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I walked again. The footsteps resumed. I didn't dare look back. Once inside the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. Standing by the shore was that same little girl. Except this time she wasn't alone. Beside her were dozens of other children, all wet, all motionless, all staring directly at me. Then, in unison, they raised their hands to wave, not as a goodbye, but as an invitation to return. I never looked back that day. But even now, whenever it rains heavily late at night, small wet footprints sometimes appear on my front porch. And just before I wake up, I can still hear that whisper. "Ryan, when are you coming back?" Story 5. The Eyes That Opened Beneath Crater Lake. You are listening to True Horror Vault. This is our final story of the night. At the start of this episode, we mentioned that many mysteries of America's lakes remain unsolved. But today's story isn't just a mystery. It's an experience that forced a man to completely change his entire life. This incident took place at Crater Lake, Oregon, the deepest lake in the United States. Reaching depths of nearly 1,943 feet, this deep blue expanse is one of the clearest lakes on Earth. Yet, many locals believe that at the absolute bottom of these depths, there lies more than just icy water. My name is Michael Hayes. I live in Bend, Oregon. I used to be an underwater documentary cameraman. For years, I dived into oceans, rivers, and lakes across the globe. Fear was nothing new to me. But after what happened at Crater Lake in August 2020, I never returned to professional diving again. Our team of 4 was granted permission to document underwater volcanic rock formations. With me were Emma, Jacob, and Tyler, all experienced divers. We conducted our first dive in the morning. Everything went smoothly, exceptionally clear water and a surreal blue light. It felt like we were exploring another planet. The second dive began around 5 p.m. We descended deeper and deeper into the dark. 60 feet, 80 feet, 100 feet. The natural light was rapidly fading. The beam from my camera rig was our only source of illumination. Right then, Jacob raised his hand and gestured, pointing downward into the abyss. At first, I thought it was a cluster of large rocks, but as I zoomed in with the camera lens, I saw rows of rounded shapes on the lake floor. No, they weren't rocks. They were human skulls. I froze in place and took a closer look. A second later, I realized they weren't human skulls. They looked like skulls, but not from any human. Emma swam up to me and wrote on her dive slate, "Let's go back." Right at that moment, a faint sound reached my ears. That should have been impossible. Human voices cannot travel through deep water like that. Yet, I distinctly heard, "Go deeper." I glanced around. No one else seemed to have heard it. As we prepared to ascend, Tyler's dive lights suddenly flickered and died. He scrambled to fix it. Right then, out of the darkness, 2 massive glowing white eyes flared open. Fixed, unblinking, staring directly at us. It felt as though those eyes were observing our entire team at once, because they were at least 10 times larger than human eyes. Panicking, Tyler began ascending rapidly toward the surface, the single most dangerous mistake a diver can make. I swam to stop him, but the entire floor of the lake shuddered violently. From deep within the black abyss below, a colossal shadow slowly shifted. I never saw its full body. I only knew it wasn't a fish, nor was it a whale. Nothing of that scale should exist inside a lake. Emma grabbed my hand tightly, trembling with terror in her eyes. Suddenly, something impossible appeared on my camera monitor. The camera was pointing straight into the dark depth. But on the screen, there weren't 4 divers. There were 5. Standing right behind us was a 5th figure, wearing an antique diving suit with an obscured face. It stood completely still. I spun around immediately. Nothing was there. I looked back at the screen. The figure was still there, now much closer. I wanted to scream, but only bubbles escaped my regulator. Right then, the strange diver on the screen slowly raised its arm and pointed downward, as if telling us, "Look down there." I made a mistake. I looked. Shining the light into the pitch-black abyss below, I saw a massive spherical structure slowly opening. At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Then it hit me. It was an eye. A single, colossal eye. It was so gigantic that an entire boat could easily sink inside its pupil. That single eye blinked once, and the entire lake vibrated. We didn't stay there for another second. Emergency ascent protocols were thrown out the window. We just wanted to stay alive. When we broke the surface, Tyler was gone. He had ascended before us, but he was nowhere to be found. Not near the boat, nor anywhere in the water. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days. No body was ever recovered, not even his air tanks. It was as if he had never existed. A week after the incident, we reviewed the camera footage. Everything looked normal until the final 2 minutes. The video feed suddenly glitched into heavy static, darkness, distortions. Then, the camera turned downward on its own. For just 1 second, that colossal eye appeared again, but right next to it stood Tyler. He was looking directly into the camera lens, smiling. He had no oxygen mask on, yet he was breathing effortlessly, and his lips were moving. There was no audio in the recording, but by reading his lips, we decoded the sentence, "It is still awake." The video file mysteriously corrupted shortly after. No one could ever play it again. I never went back to Crater Lake after that day. And whenever I see deep blue water, I can't help but feel that somewhere down in the deep dark, someone is still staring up at us with open eyes. Outro. That is all for tonight's episode. Each of these 5 stories was inspired by local legends, eyewitness claims, and dark folklore surrounding America's most haunted lakes. Where truth ends and the unknown begins, perhaps no one truly knows. Remember, if you are ever standing by a lonely lake late at night and feel like someone is calling your name from under the water, think twice before you respond. Thank you for tuning in to True Horror Vault. To hear more mysterious, chilling, and dark American horror stories, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. We will return in the next episode with another dark, terrifying story. Until then, sleep with the lights on.